Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Shri Om. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Yeah. Good. Nice to see you all for class this morning. Welcome to you. Welcome also to all the students watching online. We'll continue our study of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, Vibhuti Yoga. And we'll start with recitation, starting with verse 12. And as always, please read the translation and then repeat after me. Arjuna vacha, param brahma param dhama, pavitram paramam bhavam, purusham shashvatam divyam, Adidevam ajam vibhum, ahustvam rashayas sarve, devarshir naradas, asato devalo vyasaha, swayam chaiva pravishi me, sarvam hetadritam manye, yanmam vadasi keshava, nahite bhagavan vyaktam, vidur deva nadanavaha, swayam vetatvam purushottama, bhuta bhavana bhutesha, deva jagatpate, vaktumarhasya sheshena, divyahyatma vibhutayaha, yabhir vibhutibhir lokan, imams tvam vyapya tishtasi, katham vidyamaham yogans, tvam sada parichintayan, keshu keshu cha bhaveshu, keshu keshu cha bhaveshu, chintyosi bhagavan maya, chintyosi bhagavan maya, vistarenatmano yogam, vistarenatmano yogam, vibhutam cha janardana, vibhutam cha janardana, bhuya kataya triptirhi, bhuya kataya triptirhi, shrinvanto nasti me mritam, shrinvanto nasti me mritam. Very nice. That's Arjuna's question, we'll see. We finished 14. We start today with 15. So in this chapter, and what we're going to enter into today is the main part of the chapter, in which Sri Krishna describes his vibhutis, his glories, the many ways in which he is manifest. And in this chapter, once again, we see the emphasis of the Bhagavad Gita when it comes to the topic of bhakti. There are various approaches to bhakti. Here, the approach of the entire Bhagavad Gita is to teach you who Ishvara, God of the cosmos, really is. How can you pray to a God that you don't know? So the emphasis in the Bhagavad Gita, starting in chapter 7, then chapter 9, now in chapter 10, the emphasis is on knowledge of Ishvara, because through that knowledge, bhakti, devotion, arises in our minds and hearts. Sri Krishna, in the first part of this chapter, described himself to Arjuna as Ishvara. Sri Krishna, not merely as Arjuna's charioteer, not merely as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, as we've observed before, but Sri Krishna refers to himself here and elsewhere as Ishvara, as God of the cosmos. And significantly, Arjuna gets it. He need not have gotten it. In fact, there was an interesting scene much earlier in the Mahabharata, before the war, before they gathered on the battlefield for war, back at Dhritarashtra's palace. Sri Krishna came, I think I told you this right, very briefly. Sri Krishna came as an emissary to try to convince King Dhritarashtra to call off the war. And in that process, Duryodhana and everyone, all the Kauravas were assembled, and Sri Krishna actually manifests his cosmic form at that time. Remember, it doesn't occur just once in the Mahabharata. It occurs here in our next chapter. But I think in the Mahabharata 4 times, Sri Krishna reveals his cosmic form. So the prior time, in the palace, Sri Krishna reveals his cosmic form to everyone assembled, including Duryodhana. Did Duryodhana get it? He didn't get it. So Sri Krishna can teach you, Sri Krishna can reveal his cosmic form. You may or may not understand it. Duryodhana didn't understand it. Arjuna did. His heart was pure. And now, in response to that, Arjuna is building up to a question. And that's what we're going to see right now. So Arjuna, having understood Sri Krishna as Ishvara, as the God of the cosmos, Arjuna prepares to ask a question, which is where we pick up the thread with verse 15. Swayamevatmanatmanam, Swayamevatmanatmanam, Vetatvam Purushottama, Vetatvam Purushottama, Bhuta Bhavana Bhutesha, Bhuta Bhavana Bhutesha, Deva Deva Jagatpate, Deva Deva Jagatpate. Swayam eva, and then drop down, Vetatvam. Tvam, you. Swayameva, you and you yourself. You yourself, Veta, know. You yourself know, back up on the first line, Atmanam, yourself. You yourself know yourself, Atmana, as yourself, as you truly are. So Arjuna is making a beautiful observation here. Who can know Ishvara better than Ishvara? Who can know you? Who really understands you thoroughly? There are a few people in life who understand you very well, but no one understands you as well as you yourself. So here Arjuna makes that observation about Sri Krishna. No one knows you as you do. You yourself know yourself as you truly are, Arjuna observes. And then he addresses Sri Krishna as Purushottama, as the highest being. We translate it as supreme being. He addresses Lord Krishna several more times at the end of this verse as Bhuta Bhavana, the one who gives life, Bhuta, to all creatures. The one who gives life to all creatures, Bhutesha, Bhuta, Isha, Isha, Lord of all creatures. The one who is Deva Deva, the God of the gods, and the one who is Jagatpati, Jagatpati, master. When you address him, Pati becomes Pate, O master of the Jagat, of the world. So with all of these words, Arjuna addresses Lord Krishna with these terms of praise. So Arjuna is, I guess in building up to his question, he's kind of preparing the ground, so to speak, by praising Sri Krishna. Then, finally, he's ready now to ask. Vaktum arhasya sheshena, Vaktum arhasya sheshena, Divyāhyatma vibhūtayaha, Divyāhyatma vibhūtayaha, Yabhir vibhūtibhir lokan, Yabhir vibhūtibhir lokan, Imams tvam vyapya tishtasi, Imams tvam vyapya tishtasi. Vaktum arhasi. Literally, it means you can tell. You can tell me your divine glories. Very interesting how every language has ways of asking in a very formal way. This is the very formal way. In English, English is not a very formal language, so we just add please. But in most of the world's languages, there are specific expressions that you use to express respect and to ask very respectfully. So this is a very respectful form of request. Vaktum arhasi. Literally, you can tell, but it means please tell. Please tell me asheshena, completely. Please tell me completely, divyaha hi atma vibhutayaha. Atma vibhuti, plural, vibhutayaha. And that's the title of our chapter, right? Vibhuti, glories. Atma here means one's own. Please tell me, Atma vibhutayaha, your own glories. Divyaha, your own divine glories. Please tell me asheshena, completely. And that word is going to be a problem later on, because completely means, how do you completely describe that which is limitless? It's like, please completely describe to me all the numbers that exist. Or please completely define the number known in mathematics as pi. Remember learning in math? 3.141, I don't remember. I used to remember several digits, 141526, something like that. Anyway, if you say, please give it to me completely, it doesn't complete. There's no, if you add an infinite, you have to add an infinite number of digits after the decimal point, and you're still only approaching the actual value of pi. The point I'm making here, the point that we'll see Krishna will make, is that it's impossible to describe Ishvara's glories asheshena completely. Arjuna wants to know completely, turns out to be impossible. We'll see that in a couple of verses. So Sri Krishna, Arjuna wants to know your own glories, the glories, yabihi vibhuti bihi, the glories with which, yabihi vibhuti bihi, the glories with which, in the second line, tvam, you, vyapya, having pervaded what? Iman, in the back line, lokan, third line. Iman, lokan, these worlds. The glories with which you pervade these worlds, and tishtasi, abide within these worlds. The glories with which you pervade the worlds and abide in the worlds. This really shows Arjuna did get it. He knows that Ishvara is not a deity dwelling in some far-off loka. What does he say here? The glories with which you pervade the worlds and abide in the worlds. And the best way to understand this is to return to our dream metaphor we've used so many times. When you dream, you are Ishvara, so to speak, for your dream world. You're the creator, sustainer, destroyer of that dream world. And most certainly you, the dreamer, pervade your dream world because everything in the dream world is made of your own consciousness, your own mind stuff. And so the dream world, you abide in your dream world as the very stuff out of which your dream world is made. So the best metaphor, and it's only a metaphor. It's pretty amazing even as an observation. It's amazing to think that from the standpoint of the dream world is non-separate from you, the dream world is in you, you are in the dream world. We can use that metaphor so extensively, and yet it's only a metaphor. The reality is infinitely beyond the metaphor. Metaphors just suggest. Metaphors are pointers, right? Remember the story? The fellow points at the moon. Look! Dekho! And the fellow looks at the guy's hand. I don't see the moon, I only see a hand. So all of our metaphors are pointers. So as wonderful as this dream metaphor is, please don't imagine that the world is Ishvara's dream, because this metaphor is merely a pointer. The reality is beyond even that. And we'll see that as we continue. Then, Katam vidyamaham yogins, Katam vidyamaham yogins, Tvam sada parichintayan, Tvam sada parichintayan, Keshu keshu cha bhaveshu, Keshu keshu cha bhaveshu, Chintyosi bhagavan maya, Chintyosi bhagavan maya. Katam, how, vidyam aham. Aham, how aham, I, how can I, vidyam, how can I know? How can I know tvam, you? How can I know you, yogin, O great yogi? And here yogi is used in the term of one who has power. In ancient times, yogis were thought to have these siddhis, these special powers. So yogin, yogi, can refer not just to one who practices yoga, but here, one who has these unusual powers is addressed here, Sri Krishna. So yogi, yogin, O powerful one, how can I know katam, how? Aham vidyam, how can I know tvam, you? Sada parichintayan, sada, always parichintayan, always contemplating on you. How can I know you and contemplate on you? Interesting. Back in chapter 6, Sri Krishna gave some very specific advice for Arjuna, how Arjuna should meditate on Ishvara. And remember what Sri Krishna taught back in chapter 6? You should meditate on Ishvara present within, as your own consciousness, as the divinity that dwells within you. That was the instruction given to Arjuna by Krishna back in chapter 6. Arjuna wants more. Arjuna is quite a good student here. A complacent student will just, yep, okay, yep. But Arjuna is a very engaged student. He wants more. And he wants to know specifically, keshu cha bhaveshu, in what forms, in what manners, chintyaha asi. In what manner, chintyaha asi, you are to be contemplated upon, maya, by me. Bhagavan, O Lord, in what forms should I contemplate on you? In what manners should I contemplate on you? Even though Sri Krishna has already taught him back in chapter 6, Arjuna is asking further, and which is a good thing, because now Sri Krishna is going to give a whole variety of alternate ways to meditate on Ishvara. So the first way given in chapter 6, meditate on Ishvara's presence within you as the inner divinity, as the essence of who you are, your own consciousness, Satchidananda Atma. But now in chapter 10, each of the vibhutis, each of the glories that Sri Krishna is going to describe in just a few more verses, all of those glories are meant for the sake of contemplation. And that's what Arjuna is asking here. In what various forms, what manners, in what manners can I meditate upon you, Bhagavan, O Lord? And Arjuna concludes his question. Vistarenatmano yogam, vistarenatmano yogam, vibhutan shajanardana, vibhutan shajanardana, bhuyah kataya triptirhi, bhuyah kataya triptirhi, shrinvato nasti me mritam, shrinvato nasti me mritam. Start in the third line. Bhuyah kataya. Bhuyaha, once again, kataya, tell me once again. Tell me once again. Why once again? Well, Sri Krishna started telling his true nature back in chapter 7, and then further in chapter 9, and then further in the first part of chapter 10. So now Arjuna, another example, he's going to say, he's not satisfied. He wants more. Bhuyaha, tell me, kataya. Bhuyaha, once again, kataya, tell me. Tell me what? Go up to the top now. Tell me, atmanaha yogam. Atmana here means one's own. Tell me your own yogam. And here yoga, as I said before, means power. Tell me your yoga, and yoga here means power. Tell me your yoga, your power, and vibhutan cha, and your glories. Tell me your powers and glories, vistarena, extensively, completely, thoroughly. Tell me all this, Janardana, afflictor of men, literally. Jana Ardhana, the one who can afflict the evildoers, so to speak. So, O Krishna, please tell me the extent of your yoga, your power. Please tell me the extent of your vibhutis, your glories. Why? End of the third line. He, because triptihi, fulfillment, contentment, satisfaction, and you have to pick up the word may in the last line. May triptihi, may, for me, triptihi, satisfaction, nasti, there is no satisfaction, shrinvataha amritam. Shrinvataha, for me, having listened to your amritam, having listened to this nectar, and I'm going to translate that a little differently in just a moment, having heard this nectar-like teaching, starting in chapter 7, continuing in chapter 9, and the first part of chapter 10, having heard all of this nectar, these teachings, nasti me triptihi, I am not yet satisfied, having heard all this nectar. That word amrita can be interpreted differently also. Amrita, we commonly translate it as nectar, but its literal meaning, as you can make out, amritam, not dead. So nectar and immortality are both important meanings for this word. So Arjuna is asking about these nectar-like teachings. Arjuna is also asking about the teachings that lead you to immortality, that lead you to moksha, liberation. And with that, Arjuna concludes. Pardon me? Om, test. Seems okay. Did that just go out? Remind me later, I'll check that. Can you hear okay? Okay? Okay. Please remind me. So there might be some problem with that speaker. Okay, so after Arjuna's question, now we see Sri Krishna's response. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Hanta te katayashyami, Hanta te katayashyami, Divyahyatma vibhutayaha, Divyahyatma vibhutayaha, Pradhanyata kuru shreshta, Pradhanyata kuru shreshta, Nastyanto vistarasya me, Nastyanto vistarasya me. Sri Krishna uvacha, he said, and here comes his answer, Hanta, O dear one, te, unto you, Arjuna, katayashyami, I will tell. Unto you I will tell, Atma vibhu, that you have to break apart the words he and Atma vibhutayaha. I will tell you, he, indeed, Atma vibhutayaha, my own glories. The glories here, Atma means oneself. I will tell you my own glories, which are divyaha, my own divine glories. I will tell to you, Kuru Shreshta, O best of the Kuru lineage, I will tell you my divine glories, Pradhanyataha. Remember, Arjuna asked Asheshena, please tell me completely. And Arjuna asked, please tell me Asheshena completely. But here Sri Krishna says, I'm only going to tell you Pradhanyataha. I'm only going to tell you the main glories. Arjuna wants to hear all of them, and Sri Krishna says, I can't. I'm only going to tell you Pradhanyataha, the most prominent of my glories. Why? Nasti antaha vistarasya me. Why? Because me vistarasya, my extent, for my extent, Na asti antaha. There is no limit. Anta here means limit. Na asti antaha. There is no limit. Me vistarasya, to my extent. My glories and powers are limitless, infinite in number. Therefore, it is impossible to narrate them asheshena, completely, as Arjuna requested. So Sri Krishna says, I will tell you pradhanataha. I will tell you the most prominent of my glories. Before we continue, and there are several important things to bear in mind here. To make this relevant, we need to have the correct mindset. Let's go back to that dream metaphor. I'm trying to, a little difficult to convey the mindset here. So try this. We've used that dream metaphor. We've used the lucid dream metaphor. That's what we need to use right now. Imagine, and lucid dream, you remember from our prior class, is a dream in which you know you're dreaming. A lucid dream is to dream and to know you're dreaming in the midst of the dream. Imagine that you dreamt getting up this morning, you dreamt coming to the ashram for class, and you're dreaming now as Swami Tadatmananda is teaching chapter 10. So this is your dream. This is your lucid dream. Suppose you were to try to, and we're all your dream characters. All of us, including me, in this room, we are all your dream characters. Suppose we came to know that you were the dreamer. I mean, of course, you sitting in your chair are a manifestation of the dreamer, just like Sri Krishna is an avatara, a manifestation of Ishvara. In the same way, you, sitting in your chair, are a manifestation of the dreamer. Suppose we know you, sitting in your chair, to be a manifestation of the dreamer, and suppose we were to ask you, please tell us, Sheshena, completely, about your glories. What would that, think about it. You're sitting in this chair as a member of this, as a part of this dream world, but you have a life. Remember, you're from another perspective, you're laying on your bed, dreaming, and in the morning you're going to wake up and go off to work and live your life. Imagine narrating all of your waking activities to us, your dream characters. Do you get that? Imagine that we are your dream characters, and imagine you're going to tell us about your waking life. How amazing it would be to us. And fascinating and kind of beyond our imagination as your dream characters, it would be to us the nature of your waking life. So this is kind of the setup right now. So Sri Krishna is going to narrate something which is so absolutely fantastic to Arjuna. And he begins, and now the rest of the chapter is Sri Krishna narrating his yogam, his power, and his vibhutayaha, his glories. Let's begin. Ahamatma gura kesha, ahamatma gura kesha, sarvabhuta shayastitaha, sarvabhuta shayastitaha, ahamadischa madhyancha, ahamadischa madhyancha, bhutanamanta hevacha, bhutanamanta hevacha. Gurakesha, Sri Krishna addresses Arjuna, little obscure word, Guraka, sleep. Guraka Isha, the Lord of sleep, the one who has mastered sleep. Presumably, Arjuna can last on that battlefield for days at a time without sleeping. That's the nature of this term of address. Gudakesha, O Arjuna. Sri Krishna says, Aham, I am Atma, the self, Sarva Bhuta Ashaya Stitaha. I am the self who is stitaha, abiding, ashaya, within, sarva bhuta, within all creatures. I am the self abiding within all creatures, which is exactly where Sri Krishna left off in chapter 6. So this was what Sri Krishna, remember, the context is how to meditate on Ishvara, how to envision Ishvara, how to contemplate on Ishvara. So back in chapter 6, we began that topic where Sri Krishna says, meditate on me, abiding within. And that's where he begins here. Of course, chapter 6 began and ended with that perspective. Here, we begin with the perspective of meditating on Ishvara, abiding within, but that's only the starting point. Sri Krishna goes vastly beyond that, as we'll see in the coming verses. So Arjuna, I am the self abiding within all. This is, we so often casually use that term inner divinity. We say God dwells within ourselves, and all too often they call it, in American English, we call it soundbite. And a soundbite is a little phrase that we can understand and hold on to very easily, but we often do so without really appreciating the profundity of what that conveys. So that aspect of you which is divine. What is the aspect of you which is divine? You've heard me joke with you. If you stand in front of the mirror at home, and just to make it more interesting, take off all your clothes and stand in front of the mirror, do you see divinity? When I do that, I see this funny-looking person. I don't see divinity. The divinity is there, but the divinity obviously is not this form of flesh. What is divine about you? That which is unborn, uncreated, vast, limitless, perfect, untouched by human suffering. We're talking about your true nature, consciousness, to use a simple word. Your consciousness, and as we've discussed way back in chapter 2, the consciousness that you might think is so ordinary, upon examination, that consciousness is absolutely extraordinary, unborn, uncreated, untouched by suffering, etc., etc. All of this we've discussed long ago. We won't return to that right now. That is the divinity within. So when we use that soundbite, the inner divinity, God dwells within you, let's try to make that real. Talking about your consciousness, which is, we call it Satchidananda Atma. It is that inner divinity. Okay. Then, Sri Krishna continues. He's just getting started. What did he say? He's warming up. So here we go. He says, Aham Adihi. Aham, I am the Adihi, the beginning. Adihi cha, madhyam cha, middle. Antaha, in the last line, antaha eva cha, and the end, bhutanam, for all beings, for all creatures, for all that exists. I am the beginning, I am the middle, I am the end. Like for your dream world, you are the creator, you are the sustainer, and when you wake up, you are the destroyer, so to speak, of your dream world. In the same way, Sri Krishna says, I am the Adi, Sarva Bhutanam, for all that exists. I am Brahma. I am Madhya, Madhyama. What is it? Madhyam, middle. Vishnu, the one who sustains the universe. Antaha, the end. I am Shiva. I am Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva for all creatures, a creator, sustainer, destroyer. As I said, he's just getting warmed up. Aditya namaham Vishnur, Aditya namaham Vishnur, Jyotisham raviram shuman, Jyotisham raviram shumam, Marichir marutam asmi, Marichir marutam asmi, Nakshatra namaham shashi, Nakshatra namaham shashi. Look at the second line. Jyotisham Ravihi Ravihi Amshuman. Jyotisham, among all lights. Ravihi, I am, yet the word aham comes in the middle of the top line. Aham, I am Ravihi, I am the sun. Amshuman, the one who has rays, the shining sun. Jyotisham, among all lights, among all sources of light. What is a brighter source of light than the sun? Consider sources of light, even in modern times. We can have very bright lights, but nothing can be brighter than the sun. The sun, 93 million miles away, and still you look at the sun, it hurts your eyes. How bright is the sun? So Sri Krishna says here, I am the most brilliant of all sources of light. And let's pause here, because this style of teaching is what Sri Krishna is now going to use for the next maybe more than a dozen verses, this same style. Of these, I am the greatest. Of those, I am the greatest. Of the other ones, I am the greatest. And let's understand this style, and then we can see these verses. So I am the great. In fact, at the end of all this, after a dozen or more verses, he's going to say, I'm the greatest of the great. What can you say? Why? Why does Sri Krishna use this particular approach? Sri Krishna as Ishvara is not only the greatest of the great, is also the middle, is also the lowliest. But he doesn't say, I'm the lowliest. He says, I'm the greatest. He's also the lowliest, right? He's everything. So why doesn't he just say, I'm everything? Well, if he did say it, then a chapter would be over. But there's another reason. Sri Krishna is everything, but can we appreciate that? And just as interesting observation, if you see a beautiful tree outside, Ishvara is present in that beautiful tree. At the foot of the tree is a pile of animal dung. Is Ishvara any less present in the animal dung? Equally present, right? But now when we see the beautiful tree, we get inspired. Most of us don't get inspired seeing the animal dung. There's something about the beauty of the tree that inspires us, uplifts us, and helps us appreciate a higher truth, a higher reality. And that is the stylistic device, if I can use that kind of language. That's the style of this teaching. Sri Krishna says, I am the greatest of the great, because even though he's the lowly, He's the greatest of the great. He's also the lowliest of the lowly. He's a beautiful tree. He is also the animal dung. The greatest of the great, lowliest of the lowly. But we have a better chance of appreciating Ishvara's glories in seeing the greatest of the great. It's because of us. It's our human nature to appreciate in all that is grand and wonderful and lovely and beautiful. As I said, it inspires us, elevates us, gives us an opportunity to appreciate that. It's like when you see the great, in fact, Sri Krishna is going to say, I'm the of all mountains, I'm the Himalayas. Because when you see those towering mountains, you are just filled with this sense of awe at the majesty of those mountains. And it's that sense of awe that can elevate our thinking so that we can better appreciate who and what Ishvara is. So that's the style that Sri Krishna is going to be using again and again. In verse after verse, he's going to use this particular. Of these, I am the greatest. Of those, I am the greatest. Because by appreciating the greatest, we can be inspired to understand better who Ishvara is. Now, before we continue, one last point, a little connection to modern science. And it's this. By exploring extremes, you come to know something quite remarkable by exploring extremes. Let me make that more clear. In modern science, there are two extreme pursuits, the extreme big and the extreme small. The extreme big means looking out into the heavens with telescopes that are more and more powerful. Some of you know that a month or two ago, they just launched the successor to the Hubble Space Telescope. The successor is called the James Webb Astronomical Observatory, some fancy word like that. It's a telescope that's launched into space. It's more than 10 times more powerful than that Hubble, and it is going to give us remarkable insights about the furthest reaches of outer space. By looking into the furthest reaches of space, we come to know something profound about the entire universe. But the opposite is also true. We're using machines like the circular collider in Geneva, in Switzerland. They have the world's largest machine. This machine is, 10 kilometers across or something? I forget the size. It's huge. It's a big circle underground with a tube of vacuum, and they spin subatomic particles through this tube up at speeds approaching the speed of light. They smash these particles into each other at tremendous energy levels, and doing so, they come to learn about things which are smaller than atoms, smaller than particles. They're looking at the tiniest, the smallest, the most subtle reality underlying the cosmos. The point I'm making here, and I'm kind of trying to make it dramatic, I don't know how successful I am, but by looking out at the deepest, the furthest reaches of the cosmos, and by looking at the tiniest subatomic level, by looking out at these extremes, we come to know something profound about the universe. And in a manner of speaking, that's what Sri Krishna is going to be doing now in these coming verses, showing us the extremes. In the extremes of the universe, we can learn something about something extremely profound. We'll come back to the verse now, and you'll see what I mean. Greatest of the great. So Jyotisham, of all sources of light, Sri Krishna says, I am Ravihi, I'm the sun, Amshuman, with its rays. I'm that shining sun. Nothing is more bright than the sun. Look at the last line. Nakshatranam, among all stars. When you look up at the night sky, what is the brightest object you see? Not a star. It's the moon. So Sri Krishna says, Nakshatranam, among all stars, aham shashi, I am the moon, because the moon outshines all of the stars. I am shashi. I've told you before, this word shashi is just wonderful Sanskrit. Shasha is rabbit. Shashin, that which has a rabbit. The markings on the moon, what we in the West we say the man in the moon, the ancient rishis didn't see a man, they saw a rabbit. So the moon becomes shashi, the one that is marked with a rabbit. So among all this, in the night sky, Sri Krishna says, I am the brightest object you see. I am the moon. Now up at the top. Adityanam aham Vishnuhu. Adityanam, amongst the Adityas. Adityas are the descendants of Aditi. Aditi and Kashyapa, a lot of elaborate mythology here. So among all of the, Aditi is like she gave birth to the Devas. So amongst all the Devas born of Aditi, Sri Krishna says here, aham Vishnuhu, I am Vishnu. One of her sons was Vamana, Vamana being an incarnation of Vishnu. So among all of Aditi's progeny, among all those Devas, I am Vishnu, I am Vamana. And the third line, Marichihi Marutam. Marutam, among the Maruts. We have all these categories of gods. Maruts there are 7 groups of 7, total of 49. 49 gods, deities, known as Maruts. Among all of those Maruts, Asmi, I am Marichihi. I am the one known as Marichi. Now, some of these references are a little obscure. They're born of they come from the Puranic literature. And I am, by the way, I am absolutely not an expert in all these Puranic stories. I'll give you some level of understanding to the degree I understand, but you can spend days reading up on who was Aditi. Very and then you find that one Purana has one story, another Purana has a very different story with different characters, and nothing is reconciled. There's no consistency in these mythological stories. As you look from one Purana to another Purana to another, don't expect them to all tell you the same story. But they're wonderful stories, inspiring stories. So there are in the Puranas descriptions of these 49 Maruts. And of those 49 Maruts, Sri Krishna says, I am the greatest among them. I am the one known as Marichi. Then, Vedanam samavedosmi, Vedanam samavedosmi, Devanamasmi vasavaha, Devanamasmi vasavaha, Indriyanam manaschasmi, Indriyanam manaschasmi, Bhutanamasmi chetana, Bhutanamasmi chetana. Vedanam, among the Vedas, among the 4 Vedas, Asmi, I am, Samavedaha. Among the 4 Vedas, I am the Samaveda. Why not Rig? Why not Yaju? Yajur? Why not Atharva? Says, I am the Sama. Something must be, so he's saying, I'm the greatest of the great. The Vedas are great. There's something unique about the Sama Veda that makes the Sama stand out amongst the others. And what makes the Sama Veda stand out is it's not chanted, it's sung. Samana is song. So the mantras of the Sama Veda are meant to be sung, and the traditional mode of singing the Sama Veda is something amazing. I've never heard such a thing. If you're interested, go maybe try YouTube and just search on Sama Veda chanting, and maybe you can get a little excerpt of it. It sounds like nothing you've ever heard before, the singing of the Sama Veda. So because the Sama Veda stands out as something unique and wonderful amongst the Vedas, because it's sung in these amazing melodies, then Shri Krishna says, among the Vedas, I am the Sama. Devanam, and among the gods, Asmi, I am Vasavaha. And here we have to give the translator a D minus. Remember, the translator is the one sitting up here. D minus. Why D minus? Vasu in plural is Vasava. Can be Vasava. Wrong. It maybe grammatically it might be possible, but Vasava is also a name for Indra. Many of you would have gotten that anyway. Vasava is a common name for Indra, and Indra is well known as the king of the gods. So that's the simple meaning. So the translator really blew it here, to use American English. So Devanam, among the gods, I am Vasava, I am Indra, I am the king of the gods. Later he's going to say, among men, I am the human king. Among all people, I am the human king. And among all the gods, I am Indra, the mightiest of the gods, the king of the gods. Indriyanam, among all senses. And senses would include your 5 jnanendriyas, your powers, sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Indriyas also include your karmendriyas, organs of action, your ability to grasp, to walk, to talk, etc. So there are 10 altogether. But he says, among all these 10 indriyas, Sri Krishna says, I am the 11th. What is the 11th? Some of you know this from past Vedanta classes. So another word for indriya is karana. Karana, instrument. Among these 10 karanas, instrument, there's one called antakarana, the inner instrument, which is a common word for mind. So among all of your faculties of motion, your faculties of your sense faculties, among all these powers and faculties you possess, Sri Krishna says, I am the greatest. What is the greatest faculty we possess? Obviously, mind. Think about it. If you lost your faculties, could you have a meaningful life? If you couldn't walk and talk, we're talking about karmendriyas. If you couldn't walk and talk, could you have a meaningful life? Yes. If you couldn't see or hear, could you have a meaningful life? Yes, it'd be a great loss, absolutely. But you would still have a meaningful life, a meaningful existence. But if you had no mind, there's no meaningful life. Life is what takes place in our mind. So Shri Krishna says, among all your faculties, he says manaha, I am mind. Among all your faculties, the most fundamental of your faculties is your mind. Bhutanam, among all creatures, for all creatures, asmi, I am, Chaitana, consciousness. Even more fundamental, very Vedantic right here. For all creatures, I am consciousness. What is the most fundamental? You and I are bhutas, you and I are creatures. What is even more fundamental than mind? Mind means mental activities, your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions. All of this takes place in your mind. Clearly, your mind is more fundamental and more important than all your faculties, but more fundamental and important than your mind is consciousness. The consciousness by which your thoughts are known, the consciousness by which your emotions and perceptions are known, the consciousness that reveals the activities of your mind each and every moment. The consciousness that Sri Krishna said earlier here and back in chapter 6, that divinity dwelling within. That divinity dwelling within you and me ultimately is that consciousness. The most central aspect of our existence as conscious beings is that consciousness. Sri Krishna says, I am that consciousness. Then, Rudranam Shankaraschasmi, Rudranam Shankaraschasmi, Vittesho Yaksha Rakshasam, Vittesho Yaksha Rakshasam, Vasunam Pavakaschasmi, Vasunam Pavakaschasmi, Meru Shikari Namaham, Meru Shikari Namaham. Rudranam, among the Rudras, another category of deity. These are all references to the Puranas. So in the Puranas are references to 11 Rudras. Amongst the 11 Rudras, Sri Krishna says, Aham Shankaraha. Shankara, Shiva. I am Shankara, I am Shiva among the Rudras. Again, another category of Puranic deities among those 11 Rudras. I am the greatest. I am Shiva among the Rudras. And Yaksha Rakshasam, among the Yakshas, the celestial beings, and the Rakshasa, among the good celestial beings and the demonic celestial beings, among all those celestial beings, again described in the Puranic literature, among them all, Sri Krishna says, I am Vittesha. I am the Isha, the Lord of Vitta, wealth, which is a way of describing the deity we know as Kubera. You've seen references to Kubera, the god of wealth. So among all of these celestial beings, I am Kubera, I am the god of wealth. That makes sense. The greatest of these celestial beings is the god of wealth. Vasunam. I made an incorrect reference to the Vasus before. Here we have the correct reference. Vasunam. There were 8 Vasus. Some of you know the story in the Mahabharata. Those 8 Vasus were born unto goddess Ganga and King Shantanu. Another story, we won't go there. But among those 8 Vasus, those deities known as Vasus, 8 deities, I am Pavakaha cha asmi. I am the one known as Pavaka. Pavaka can mean fire. Pavaka can also mean the son of the god known as Agni. Was one of the Vasus, and Shikarinam. Shikara, peak. Shikarin, one that has a peak, mountain. Shikarinam. Amongst all mountains, Sri Krishna says, I am Meru. Meru is a mountain in the Himalayas that's considered to be not an ordinary mountain, but a mountain that is like the axis of the earth, the central point on which the earth spins. That sacred mountain Meru, amongst all mountains, I am Meru. We'll just see a few more verses. There's a long sequence here. Another dozen. We'll just see a few more, and we'll go a little quickly just to conclude our class and to let the poetry, and these verses are meant to be highly poetic, highly inspiring, to elevate us and to appreciate the beauty so that we can appreciate better who and what is Ishvara. Purodhasam cha mukhyam mam, Purodhasam cha mukhyam mam, Vidhi partha brahaspatim, Vidhi partha brahaspatim, Senani namaham skandaha, Senani namaham skandaha, Sarasamasmi sagaraha, Sarasamasmi sagaraha. Purodhasam, among priests. So there are priests that perform these elaborate Vedic rituals. So among all these priests, in the second line, Partha, O Arjuna, Vidhi, understand, Mam, me, in the first line, among all priests, O Arjuna, understand me to be the Mukhyam, the foremost priest amongst all priests. Who would be the foremost priest? The foremost priest would be the priest of the gods. And the priest of the gods is the one we call Brahaspati. Brahaspati in the Puranic stories is the god who served as the priest to the other gods. Senaninam, amongst all warriors. Amongst all warriors would be the mightiest warrior, not mightiest human warrior, but mightiest of the gods who were warriors. And who is that? Sri Krishna says, Aham Skandaha. Skanda, or Subramanya, the son of Lord Shiva, was also the head of the celestial armies, was Skanda. Sarasamasmi, Sarasam, amongst all waters, Sarasam, amongst all waters, Asmi, I am, Sagara, the sea. Amongst all waters, I am the sea. We'll make an observation here. The significance of the sea. Consider the fact that every drop of water you drink has its origin where? It comes out of your tap, I know, or for many it comes out of the bottle of drinking water you have. Fine, where does that water come from? Well, you can say, well, it comes from this river or it comes from this well. Well, how does the water get into the well or get into the river? From the rain, right? Okay. How does the water get up in the clouds? Now you get it. It starts in the sea. Water from the sea evaporates up into the clouds. So every drop of water you drink comes from the seas. So of all waters, Sri Krishna says, I am the seas. Now, we won't go further today. There's a whole lot more verses to come in the same style, but we'll end with this observation. All of this is meant for contemplation. And I'll give you, this is a good place, I'll give you a very specific example of how to contemplate. The next time you drink water, which is likely to be quite soon, Think about it. Where does that water come from? Comes from the tap, comes from the well, which comes from the rain, which comes from the sea, which comes from Ishvara. This is the kind of contemplation that leads us to appreciate the God of the cosmos who supports and sustains all of us. All that lives is supported and sustained by that Ishvara. These verses give us material that we can use either in formal seated meditation or throughout the day. Opportunities to appreciate the God of the cosmos, the one because of whom we all live. There are so many more examples that we'll see in the coming classes. Before we conclude, a quick announcement. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have satsang, question-answer period at 6 p.m. So please come and join us for satsang 6 p.m. If the weather is nice, we'll sit out back in the garden. If it's raining, we can sit inside the hall. So please join us. We'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavidam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspataha Nashrinvan Utabasira Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukhka Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Mahamritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.